Okay, so let's set up some shaders. And I just want to set down 4 spheres. And we'll take a look at the 4 main shaders that you'll probably set up. So that is metal, wood, rock, and glass. So within the shop net, I'll drop down a new shader, a new Arnold shader network. And inside, again, I'll drop down the standard surface. Just plug this in. Just cancel this for now. And I'll just duplicate this down and rename these to metal, wood, rock, and glass. Cool. So now I'll drop down some spheres just so we can apply these two. And set this to polygon mesh. I'll increase the subdivisions for now. I'll just bring these to the camera. And make some copies of this guy. Bring them all back together at the end. And I also want to UV this just before we apply some textures. So I'll use the UV project and set this to polar. And I'll initialize it. Let's see what those look like. That's fine. Awesome. Let's just set these up. Cool, so this is fine. Let me just add some material nodes that we can apply. And point these towards the materials, so metal, wood, rock, and glass. Sweet, so the first one is metal. Let me just go back to the render view and see what this looks like here. Okay, so jumping inside, again, I'll set this back to 1 and I'll reduce this down, something like 0.7, and crank up the metalness. Cool, and that's all you really need to do for the metal. Let's take a look at the wood. For this, I'll need an image to bring in a texture. Let me just plug this in to base color and find the texture that I want. Now, all the textures that I plan to use are from textures.com, so you can find these for free. And again, I'll just make sure that this is set to sRGB texture and re-render. Nice. I also want to get the roughness map. this can be set to raw. I'll plug this in to specular roughness. And I also want the displacement map. And I'll plug this in to displacement here. Cool, and it's already set to raw. So to get this displacement to show up, we just need to add some subdivisions to this. Within the Arnold tab, we can do this here. Set this to Catmull Clark. And of course, I'll need to re-render to see this. If I want to render just a section, I just hold in Shift and drag out a little window here. And within the displacement tab, I can reduce this. Again, I'll need to re-render, as sometimes you get these render window errors. One thing I also want to press is this auto bump, and what this does is it takes the values from the height map and applies them as a bump on top. Cool. So this is the basic way of setting up displacement maps, and within the shader we can blend these together. We will take a look at that later. Let's do the same thing for the rock. Now, although these color spaces are set up automatically, which means I do not have to change them, I just wanted to let you see how to do this if you did want to. So let's just plug in the rock texture maps here. Again, these are from textures.com. And on the rock, again, set this to 1. One thing worth mentioning is that the specular level should be left at 1. This is because all objects have a reflectivity. It's just dictated by how rough or glossy that reflection is. If we wanted to increase the amount of specular, we could use this, the IOR. One thing I want to add to the rock, and I could also add this to the tree, is some sheen. And this just simulates a little bit more microfaceting on the surface. It's also very good for fabric. Okay, let me hit render here and just take a little render window. Cool. So we can boost this up within the displacement just by dropping down a multiply and multiplying it here. Our displacement padding is cutting this off at the bottom, so we can change that on the top level. Nice, so this works for rock. And finally, let's take a quick look at the glass. So we don't have refraction here, or we do, but it is called transmission instead. So if we just ramp this up to 1, a nice thick glass. If we want to add some depth here, we would first change the colour to take these off 1 and off 0, and then increase the depth. There we go. Cool. Let me just reset this. So this is how you would make water, for instance, within the river. If we wanted to create something like a simple bubble, we would enable thin walled down here, and you can see what we get. Since the roughness of the transmission is related to the roughness of the specular, we would set this to 0 and add some more reflection if we wanted to add some rough reflection on the clear coat, which just adds another level on top. Another level of reflection. Cool. Now, of course, for a bubble, you would need some more look dev than this. Maybe add some aberration, etc. But this will do for just the overview. Cool. So this looks pretty cool. Finally, what we would want to look at is the SSS shading that we will use for the leaves on our tree, but that can wait until we get them in to the look dev scene. Thanks.